Welcome to our deep dive. And today we're tackling De Magnete, a book written by William Gilbert, published in 1600.
Oh yeah, Magnete.
It's basically like the OG of magna science, right?
Absolutely, it really is. I mean, you think about it, 1600,
Yeah.
that's, before we had any real concept of what a laboratory was, and yet Gilbert was already doing meticulous research on magnets for 18 years.
18 years.
18 years.
Wow. I can't even stick with a hobby for 18 weeks.
Right. Incredible dedication.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff was he doing for 18 years? Like, what kind of experiments are we talking about here?
Well, one of the most fascinating things is this. He created a miniature Earth out of a lodestone. He called it a terrella.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't just like a cool little model. He used this to actually study how the Earth's magnetic field worked.
So he was, like, playing with a mini Earth to figure out the real one.
Exactly. Pretty ingenious for the time, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, totally. And I think it's important to remember that back then, people had some pretty wild ideas about magnets.
Oh, absolutely. Some people believed that if you, rubbed garlic on a magnet, it would lose its power.
Garlic? Really?
Yeah. And there were all these stories about, magnetic islands that could pull the nails right out of passing ships.
No, thank you. I do not want to be on that boat.
No, it doesn't sound like a fun cruise.
No, but Gilbert, he was debunking these myths with actual science. So what would you say was his biggest, his aha moment?
Well, I think his most revolutionary discovery was that the Earth itself is a giant magnet.
Wait, the whole Earth? Like our entire planet is just one massive magnet.
That's exactly what he figured out, and
Yeah.
this explained why compasses always point north.
Wow, okay. I never thought about it like that, but that makes so much sense. So what were the implications of that? I mean, realizing the Earth is this giant magnet, what did that change?
Oh, it changed everything. Think about it. Suddenly, navigation became so much more reliable.
Yeah.
Sailors could now cross vast oceans with more confidence, and it really challenged the prevailing view of the universe at that time. Well, the church held a lot of sway back then, and they believed that the Earth was the center of everything.
Right.
And Gilbert's findings, well, they kind of threw a wrench in that whole idea.
Okay, so if the Earth is this giant magnet, why doesn't a compass always point perfectly north?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. You see, Gilbert realized that the Earth's magnetic field isn't perfectly uniform. There's this thing called magnetic variation.
Magnetic variation.
Yeah. It means that a compass needle might point slightly off from true north.
So it's like your GPS is giving you kind of wonky directions, but back in the 1600s.
Yeah, exactly. And this could be pretty unnerving for explorers back then, relying on compasses to chart unknown territories.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So how did Gilbert explain this variation thing?
Well, he attributed it to irregularities on the Earth's surface, things like mountains and different land masses. He realized that these features could actually influence the magnetic field.
Oh, so he was already starting to understand the connection between, the Earth's physical makeup and its magnetic properties.
Exactly. And get this, he even designed instruments to measure this variation. Talk about being ahead of his time.
Yeah, that's incredible. So it's like he gave these early explorers a more accurate map in a world that was still being discovered.
Precisely. But his curiosity didn't stop there. Gilbert also tackled some pretty big cosmic questions.
Not quite.
Well, back then there was this popular concept called the primum mobile.
Okay.
Basically, it was this idea that an invisible force was spinning the entire universe around a stationary Earth.
So, Earth was the VIP in the center of it all.
Exactly. But Gilbert, well, he wasn't so sure about that.
Really? So what did he think was happening?
He argued that it made much more sense for the Earth to be rotating on its own axis.
That's pretty radical for his time.
Yeah.
What led him to that conclusion?
Remember his terrella, that mini Earth he built? He noticed something interesting. When he placed a magnetized needle near it, the needle didn't just point north, it also dipped downwards at an angle.
Oh, so the needle was drawn toward a specific point on the terrella, not just like a direction in space.
Exactly. And this dipping behavior, which is called magnetic inclination, while it supported the idea of the Earth itself being a giant magnet that was spinning.
Wow. So by studying this mini Earth, he was actually gathering evidence to support a rotating Earth.
Exactly. It was some seriously innovative thinking, especially for that time.
Yeah. So Gilbert, this guy, he wasn't just messing around with magnets. He was actually challenging the entire understanding of the universe.
He really was. And his challenge to the primum mobile was just the beginning. His work had a huge impact on later scientists like Galileo and Newton, who would go on to solidify the idea of a spinning Earth. But we'll get into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, can't wait. This is getting good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into De Magnete. Last time we left off with Gilbert, kind of shaking things up, challenging that whole prima mobile concept.
Right, using his mini-Earth experiment to, question the whole idea of a stationary Earth.
Yeah, and it's interesting because challenging this cosmic idea, it wasn't just theoretical, actually brought him back to a very practical issue.
Which was?
Navigation. Gilbert realized that the Earth's magnetic field, it wasn't this perfect uniform force,
So a compass wouldn't always behave the same way everywhere you went.
Exactly. He noticed that a compass needle would sometimes deviate from true north, even when there weren't any mountains or huge land masses nearby to explain it.
So basically he was saying that there were, these unseen forces messing with the magnetic field.
And that's where his insights get even more fascinating, He actually theorized that these variations might be caused by differences in the composition of the Earth's crust, or maybe by, underground mineral deposits. He was basically hinting at what we now call geomagnetism.
Geomagnetism.
Yeah, it's the study of the Earth's magnetic field and where it comes from. It's like he was laying the groundwork for a whole new field of science centuries before it really took off.
Wow, so ahead of his time. But his quest to understand the forces at play within the Earth, it didn't stop there, did it?
No, not at all. You see, Gilbert believed that the Earth actually had a kind of soul.
Hold on, a soul? We're talking about rocks and dirt here.
I know, it sounds a little out there, right?
Mm.
But remember, back then, science and philosophy, they were intertwined. The idea wasn't as far-fetched as it might seem to us now.
So while we might not use the term soul in modern science, Gilbert was basically trying to understand what made the Earth tick, at its core.
Yeah, exactly, but did his ideas catch on right away? Well, not really.
I can imagine that challenging long-held beliefs, especially those supported by powerful institutions like the church, it wouldn't have been easy.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. Even though there was initial resistance, Gilbert's work, it planted a seed, De Magnete. It circulated widely among scholars, and his influence can be seen in the work of later scientists. Think Galileo, Kepler, even Isaac Newton.
So even if people didn't immediately embrace his ideas, his research acted like a catalyst, right? Pushing other scientists to think differently.
Precisely. And it wasn't just his findings that were influential, it was his whole approach. His meticulous experiments, his careful observations, and, that willingness to challenge those long-held beliefs. Those became hallmarks of the scientific method.
So De Magnete wasn't just a book about magnets. It was like a blueprint for a whole new way of looking at the world.
Exactly. And speaking of challenging the status quo, remember how we were talking about magnetic variation?
Right, that whole compass not always pointing perfectly north thing.
Right.
We talked about how he connected it to things like mountains and land masses, but did he go any deeper into what might be causing those variations?
He did. He theorized that these variations, they might be caused by differences in, the composition of the Earth's crust, or maybe even underground mineral deposits.
Wow, so he was on the right track, even though he didn't have all the tools and technology we have today.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important point. Gilbert was a huge advocate for using accurate and reliable instruments and research. He believed that, careful observation and precise measurement, they were essential to uncovering the secrets of nature.
So he wasn't just a theorist, he was a tinkerer, too. Understanding that, progress in science, it relied on having the right tools.
Precisely. And that emphasis on instrumentation, it had a lasting impact. Future generations of scientists, they were inspired to design and build even more sophisticated instruments, which allowed them to make even more precise observations.
It's amazing how his influence, it just ripples through history. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more aspect of Gilbert's work that I think we should touch on.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What else did this magnetic pioneer uncover?
Well, remember that whole concept of the Earth having a soul? It wasn't just about magnetism and rotation. It was also connected to his broader philosophy of nature.
Ah, yes, his idea of an animate universe.
Right. He believed that everything in the universe, from the stars to rocks and trees, they all had a kind of life force.
And this way of thinking, it's woven throughout De Magnete. He constantly draws parallels between the vastness of the cosmos and the intricate workings of the Earth. He saw magnetism as this fundamental force that was operating on every level of existence.
So he wasn't just focused on isolated phenomena. He was trying to understand those underlying principles that connect everything.
Precisely. And that's what makes De Magnete so captivating. It's not just a scientific treatise. It's like this philosophical exploration of, well, of reality itself.
We've gone from magnets to the Earth's rotation to like the very essence of existence.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these ideas, how they influence not only science, but also art, literature, and even politics. Stay tuned for the grand finale of our De Magnete adventure.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into De Magnete. It's incredible how this journey started with magnets, and now we're like talking about the soul of the universe.
I know, right? Gilbert's work really does take us on quite a ride. And in this last part, we're going to kind of zoom out, look at the bigger picture. The world Gilbert was living in and how his ideas spread out from there.
Okay, so paint the scene for us. What was happening in Europe during this time? What might have influenced Gilbert's thinking?
Well, picture Europe in the late 1500s, early 1600s. The Renaissance is in full swing. It was this incredibly vibrant time, challenging old ways of thinking, sparking these new discoveries in art, literature, and obviously science.
Sounds like a pretty exciting time to be alive. Lots of new ideas floating around.
Oh, it definitely was. And geographically, it was also the age of exploration. Navigators were like charting new territories all across the globe.
So sea voyages were becoming more and more important.
Exactly. Voyages were getting longer, more ambitious, and the demand for accurate navigation tools, it was skyrocketing.
So Gilbert's work on magnets and the Earth's magnetic field, it was coming at just the right time.
It was perfect timing. It wasn't just theoretical. It had this huge practical impact on exploration and trade.
And I bet it also helped with map making.
Oh, absolutely. Accurate maps were essential for those explorers and traders. Gilbert's work helped improve the accuracy of maps and charts. It's fascinating how these scientific discoveries, they often have these ripple effects, influencing things you wouldn't even think about.
It's true. It's like one discovery leads to another and then another. But we can't really talk about this time period without mentioning the church. They had such a huge influence back then.
Oh, for sure. Their authority was being challenged on, like, all these different fronts, especially the long-held belief that the Earth was the center of everything.
Right, the geocentric view of the universe.
Yeah. And Gilbert, advocating for a spinning Earth, challenging that primum mobile idea, he was essentially aligning himself with this broader shift away from that church-centric view.
That must have taken some guts.
It did. It was a risky move for sure. But, it shows his dedication to truth wherever that truth led. His work, along with Galileo and Copernicus, it really helped usher in a new era of scientific inquiry.
Wow, so Gilbert was like this key player in the scientific revolution, huh? Helping change how people saw the world.
Absolutely. But remember, he wasn't just making scientific statements. He was also engaging in these philosophical debates about the very nature of reality.
Right, that whole formate soul idea, driving the Earth's magnetism and rotation.
Exactly. He wasn't just describing a physical force. He was suggesting this kind of life force within the Earth.
So in a way, he was merging science and philosophy, showing how they could both work together to understand the universe.
Precisely. For Gilbert, true knowledge came from combining observation with deep philosophical thought. And, this approach, it has echoes in some of our modern ideas, like interconnectedness and that kind of unity of all things.
Yeah, it's all connected, man. So what does this all mean for us all these centuries later? What's Gilbert's lasting legacy?
Well, it's multifaceted, that's for sure. He laid the groundwork for our understanding of magnets. He revolutionized navigation, contributed to map making, and of course challenged those old beliefs about the universe. But maybe the most important thing is this. He embodies that spirit of scientific inquiry, that constant pursuit of truth.
He reminds us that science isn't just about memorizing facts, right? It's about asking questions, being curious.
Exactly. And in a world that's, overflowing with information, I think that spirit of critical thinking, of questioning everything, it's more important now than ever.
Gilbert's work, it really encourages us to look beyond what's obvious, question assumptions, and to never stop exploring the world around us. He shows us how one person's passion can change everything, inspire new knowledge, push the boundaries of what we think we know.
Well said. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into De Magnete. It's been a fascinating journey through magnets, exploration, and how our scientific understanding has changed over time.
I have to say, when we started this, I never thought magnets could be this interesting. Gilbert's story reminds us that even something as seemingly simple as a magnet can unlock these incredible truths about the universe.
It really can.
Yeah.
So, to all of you listening out there, remember William Gilbert and his never-ending quest for knowledge. Let his story inspire you to explore, to question, and to keep that spark of curiosity alive. You never know what amazing things you might discover.